Hello friends, welcome to another Gord's Poetry Show. This time it's number 3. And I have a lovely selection of poetry for you today. And I'd like to start with a letter by Emily Dickinson to her sister in what the editor believes was 1857. Dear sister, after you went, a low wind warbled through the house like a spacious bird, making it high but lonely. When you had gone, the love came. I supposed it would. The supper of the heart is when the guest has gone. Shame is so intrinsic in a strong affection, we must all experience Adam's reticence. I suppose the street that the lover travels is thenceforth divine, incapable of turnpike aims. That you be with me annuls fear, and I await commencement with merry resignation. Smaller than David, you clothe me with extreme Goliath. Friday I tasted life. It was a vast morsel. A circus passed the house. Still I feel the red in my mind, though the drums are out. Now, wouldn't you just love to get a letter like that? Dear Emily, dear Emily, how we miss you. Now I'd like to move to the 2011 Griffin Poetry Prize anthology and read a couple of poems by Suzanne Buffam. Ruined Interior. In the beginning was the world, then the new world, then the new world order, which resembles the old one, doesn't it? Its crumbling aqueducts, its trinkets and shingles, its pathways lacquered in fog. If all we've done is blink a bit and touch things, notice how dust describes a tin can by not falling where it sits, or how a red sleeve glimpsed through curtains mimics the tip of a flickering wing. Was the whole day a waste, or can worth be conferred on a less than epic urge? Bow wow, says the doggy on page 2. Ahoy, says the sailor. Arise, says the tired queen, and face the highway, the donut shops and the boardwalk. It rained today. You can see perfect inversions of streetlights suspended in drops on the window. You can see the skyline trying to hold up the sky. Don't tell me there's another, better place. Don't tell me there's a sea above our dreaming sea, and through the windows of heaven the rains come down. Now, I have discovered a book by a Belgian poet, Francois Jacqmin. It's called The Book of the Snow. It's translated by one Philip Mosley. This lovely poetry was written sometime before 1992, when the poet's life came to an end. And this translation is quite recent, and it really is quite lovely. And those of us in the northern climes will appreciate these visions of snow, even though we don't really have much this year. Snow overlays snow and cancels out its whiteness. Everything lives and dies out like that. Being keeps house. At a stroke it settles the squall, or the propensity to reason why. Original certainty remains thus, by distinguishing nothing from nothing. The time comes when hesitation reveals itself as the most practical way of being in the world. You watch the dissolution of truth and matter without emotion. Music is deemed slanderous from the very first bars. You no longer fuss over the absolute. You consider it to be a displaced melancholy, an improper sadness. That is just a couple of stanzas from a 130, 140 page book, The Book of the Snow. Thank you, Francois. Now to Toronto poet, contemporary Toronto poet David Donnell, whose story poems with their many high culture and low culture references I generally quite enjoy. This is from his recent book called Watermelon Kindness. And the poem is called She Thinks Zen is Too Intellectual. It's a hot Thursday afternoon, and I'm hanging out with my friend Paul Fieldstone at a little cafe called Dooney's in Bloor Street. I'm talking about this girl I've just met, Jenna, young, maybe 26. She's a receptionist for a dentist I see once or twice a year. You know, dental hygiene, cleaning, whitening, stuff like that. I say she's got the most peaceful face I've ever seen. Very centered. She's not distracted by anything. If I say, "How long do you think Gloria is going to be?" she just laughs very peacefully and says, "Oh, not a long time." Paul shrugs and says, "You're not telling me anything. What does she look like?" He makes that egregious hourglass motion with his hands that women tend to dislike. I say, "Oh yeah, she's all there. Beautiful face, lovely body. But it's this peacefulness that gets me. She stops me cold. I just sit there and smile at her like a dumb puppy." "I don't know how people like Jenna do it," I say. One thing, they're not totally involved in issues. And if a relationship gets steamy, a problem, they automatically define it as a bad relationship. They call it bad karma. I laugh. Paul says, "Well, there you go, Sky Chief. She's got a simple belief system and probably thinks you're adventurous and all mixed up." Now, going back in history to America, 1957, to the Beat Generation, West Coast, I believe he was West Coast, Jack Spicer, from his book After Lorca, I believe his first chapbook, 1957, as I said. This poem is the last one in the book. It's called Radar and subtitled A Postscript for Marianne Moore. No one exactly knows exactly how clouds look in the sky, or the shape of the mountains below them, or the direction in which fish swim. No one exactly knows. The eye is jealous of whatever moves, and the heart is too far buried in the sand to tell. They are going on a journey, those deep blue creatures, passing us as if they were sunshine. Look, those fins, those closed eyes, admiring each last drop of the ocean. I crawled into bed with sorrow that night. Couldn't touch his fingers. See the splash of the water, the noisy movement of cloud, the push of the humpbacked mountains deep at the sand's edge. Well, Jack, thank you for that. Now, an early chapbook by Torontonian Jim Smith from 1986. It's called Convincing Americans. And there's a small section in it which I believe is somewhat reflective on Spicer. And that section is called Left at Spicer. And this little poem is called Muskoka Spicer. Spicer came back, said, "Today we are not half stupid. Today we are virtually radios. Come back, everyone, come back. There is a gardener for each of us. He's well endowed and has a master plan." There are many, many contemporary poets who are almost unknown to me. I find their books and I think, never heard of this one before. And, I'm relatively knowledgeable about poetry. And there's a vast amount of it getting published, even just in North America alone. Never mind, Britain, Europe, Australia. Now, I discovered a poet called Jonathan Lockhart. He's been writing for years, of course. And his newest book is called Musing. It's a book of sonnets that traditionally revered form, going back to at least Elizabethan times. Now, this book, Musing, has 100 or so pages of sonnets in it. And this is one of them. Daughter, you are more delicate than any of my words. You quicken me and keep me from gloom. You stride this side of being a woman and calling the world, I hope, your own. When I saw you rise up from the womb, thrashing, wide-eyed, moving your limbs with intelligence, I knew I could teach you nothing, but might be your guide this side of paradise. What can I say about love when time has changed and you will have a world to invent? I hear your wit as I fade in the wood, and the limbs of the gods have turned to leaves. Lovely lyric, that. Now, from a recent book, let's go back to the 1980s. Canadian poet Anne Michaels and her book, The Weight of Oranges, and a brief lyric called Women on a Beach. Light chooses white sails, the bellies of gulls. Far away in a boat, someone wears a red shirt, a tiny stab in the pale sky. Your three bodies form a curving shoreline, pink and brown sweaters, bare legs. The beach glows grainy under the sun's copper pressure. Air the color of tangerines. One of you is sleeping. The wind's finger on your cheek like a tendril of hair. Night exhales its long-held breath. Stars puncture through. At dusk, you are a small, soft heap, a kind of moss in the moonlight, a boulder of women. Now, the former poet laureate of the United States, Billy Collins, and his book Ballistics from a number of years ago. Well, actually, no, it's quite recent, just a couple of years ago. And a fascinating little poem I found called Pornography. In this sentimental painting of rustic life, a rosy-cheeked fellow in a broad hat and ballooning green pants is twirling a peasant girl in a red frock, while a boy is playing a squeeze box near a turned-over barrel, upon which rests a knife, a jug, and a small drinking glass. Two men in rough jackets are playing cards at a wooden table, and in the background a woman in a bonnet stands behind the half-open Dutch door, talking to a merchant or a beggar who is leaning on a cane. This is all I need to inject me with desire, to fill me with the urge to lie down with you, or someone very much like you, on a cool marble floor or any fairly flat surface, as clouds go flying by and the rustle of tall, leafy trees mixes with the notes of birdsong. So clearly does the work speak of vanishing time, obsolete musical instruments, passing fancies, and the corpse of the largely forgotten painter mouldering somewhere beneath the surface of present-day France. Thank you, Billy. Nice slice of life there. And moving from the earthy to the sublime, let me finish off with Wallace Stevens. Wonderful, heroic Wallace, progenitor of much 20th century poetry. This is called "The House Was Quiet and the World Was Calm." The house was quiet and the world was calm. The reader became the book, and the summer night was like the conscious being of that book. The house was quiet and the world was calm. The words were spoken as if there were no book, except that the reader leaned above the page, wanted to lean, wanted much most to be the scholar to whom his book is true, to whom the summer night is like a perfection of thought. The house was quiet because it had to be. The quiet was part of the meaning, part of the mind, the access of perfection to the page. And the world was calm. The truth in a calm world in which there is no other meaning. Itself is calm. Itself is summer and night. Itself is the reader leaning late and reading there. Some lovely poetry for you, friends. I hope you enjoyed that, as I enjoyed reading it. Perhaps next time some poets from the history of poetry from hundreds of years ago. I shall dig out the anthologies. Because, as we know, all poetry is one, and all poets are talking to each other about the beauties and the mysteries of this world and this life, and many lives.